Welcome everyone to another episode of Cinematic Realms, a special Halloween edition. I'm your host. With me, as always, is my good friend Jared Kozel, and we are welcoming a special guest this week, returning to the channel, Blue Lemons, Trish.
Hi.
How are you doing, Trish?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good.
Glad things have settled down so that I could actually uh, join another stream because I know we were trying to make it happen. It just didn't work out, but
Yeah, and it's been a while, I feel like, since Jared, since you and I have had someone on the channel as a guest. Everyone's been so busy doing things, having a life. So
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's easier just to say, "Oh, we'll just do it ourselves."
Yeah, I actually think that the last time we had a guest of any kind on was when Laura was on with us for The Witch back in March.
oh yeah,
But for Trish, it's been almost a full year. We were just talking about for our last year's Halloween edition with Sleepy Hollow. So, hey, AR.
God, yeah. First, a little housekeeping out of the way. Might have noticed a name change in the corner, Gwen. Also confusing because the channel says John Webster Film. Still, love the name John. Sticking with it for the channel for the time being. But I'm also going to go by Gwen. So for those of you who are like online with me and in the Here We Dragon Slack, you know all the reasons why. I won't get into that, but yeah. So, and also I wanted to say I hope you all like my Sabine Wren shirt that I'm wearing today. I'll show off like the whole thing. I'm very, very happy with it. And I thought, you know what, I wasn't going to debut it for a while until I maybe slimmed down a little bit. But I thought the colors are right for Halloween. It's got some orange in there, so I thought, why not? AR is going. Gwen Webster Film has a nice ring to it, so well maybe. I have to see if Sandry still has the source files for my graphics, and maybe we can make some modifications. Who knows? But yeah, no, not to not bury the lead anymore. We are talking about the movie Aliens today, which I did a stream on the first film a long while back with the beloved Carol Brown. If any of you have not seen that stream, please go back and watch it because Carol was an absolute gem and she was hilarious. And so it's probably one of my favorite streams that I've done. But we have never covered Aliens on the channel. I did have a conversation about it over on Here Be Dragons with Stev, and Laura was on for that, who we tried to get on for this stream, but she wasn't available. But that's okay. I would feel worse if I hadn't already talked about it with her, over on that channel. So, but we're gonna have some scary fun today, and oh my God, just watching this movie again today, I was like, holy shit, this is such a wonderful, awesome, scary, intense movie. So yeah, just want to say we actually have people in our audience. This is what happens when we have a guest, and it's not just you and me, Jared, but also because it's a movie that some people have actually seen, except for, of course, Kate, because Kate has never seen anything. Yeah, so yeah, just welcome everybody. It's so great to see you guys. Yes, yes, they are. Kate has seen 4 films, and they were all Marvel movies.
That's not true. She's also seen Beauty and the Beast. You talked about it with her.
Oh, okay, Beauty and the Beast, and also Mean Girls. So yeah. Maybe she's not including the Marvel movies. But which, by the way, I have to say, I rewatched parts of that stream recently because it was such a great stream. Go back and watch that if for no other reason than I got to recite Gretchen's Caesar speech and probably had some of the most fun in my entire life. So yeah. Okay, we found out the other one, Little Mermaid. I think we've accounted for the four. But where do we even start with this one? Obviously, we're talking about it because, hey, it's Halloween week, and so we picked a scary movie. And Jared had proposed potentially the newest one, Alien Romulus, but because of my only buying on physical media policy, I won't actually have that until the first week of December. So we have to hold off on that.
Oh darn! We have to wait and talk about things again.
But yeah, no, Aliens is an absolute classic and just has to be one of the best sequels of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I remember seeing bits of this as a kid. Same thing with the first one. In particular, I remember seeing the scene at the end when Ripley and the alien, go down, to the hatch or whatever it is where the ship opens up. I remember that as an image from a kid, but not much else. And then I saw it again finally in full as an adult when I said I should probably actually check out those Alien movies. And yeah, I've just loved these movies more and more as time has gone on. My number one love is with the first film, the Ridley Scott original. And Laura isn't here to fight me on that because I know for a fact her favorite. Okay, cool, excellent. She will let you know that Aliens is her number one favorite, but you can't lose either way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just such like a tour de force of a movie. So yeah, Trish, you're the guest, so I'm gonna let you go and talk about what's your history with this movie, and when did you see it, and how much did where did this enter into the story of you and scary movies?
Oh my gosh. I think it probably came somewhere midway. I can't remember when the first time I actually saw it was, but but I know when I did, I knew that I love a creature feature, and the alien design is what got me. That is, yeah. I mean, there's always variations on it, some more successful than others.
Yeah.
But it is so disturbing, and I think it just taps into something some primordial fear that we have, the way it's shaped and the way it moves and what it does is that's, I think, the reason why that it's timeless. It cannot, that's why the original movie from 1979, just you could still watch it today and it still looks good. Yep, I am. This is actually my husband's Wayland Yutani hat, so I had to steal it. So yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I borrowed it. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was mainly the creature design that was so shocking and disturbing to me. But I think it just works in so many different movies. So I even liked Alien 3. So I know I'm kind of one of those few people that did. But
I will save some time for dissertations on various feelings about Alien.
Yeah, I mean, I even enjoy the Alien Predator crossovers. So
those are my blind spot in the franchise.
I like Predator too, like Predator, Alien, right? Those two.
Yeah, I very much like. I've seen Predator multiple times, and I even way back in the day have seen Predator 2. So
yeah. I don't know. So I don't know. I probably saw different movies at different times. Like I don't think I even saw them in order necessarily. But they've always like they're so rewatchable. And like I am a horror fan, but 99% of horror movies are not really. They're very forgettable. But this one has a lot of rewatchability.
yeah, and Kate, like I'm bringing this up again because there's scary movies, but then there's like the scary movies that everybody should see, and that includes, you know, at least the first two Alien films, which are both bona fide classics. And what did we talk her into? What did she? Yeah, she did. She did watch the Witch with us, and and at least I think that's what it was. Was there something else where she was like, why am I watching this? I don't remember if it was that or if there was something else, but I feel like we've tempted her into a couple things. And speaking of which, you guys have gotten me to watch more scary movies than I was previously comfortable with.
We try to pinpoint the ones that have very a quality cinematic value that will entice you. And as I was mentioning to you earlier in the Cinematic Realms channel in our Slack group, that I am going to get you to watch The Substance because I think you will be very impressed on many levels.
You were almost there, but then you brought up like the Thing level horror effects, and like that is a non-starter for me. I haven't even seen that movie, but I've seen images, and I'm like, nope.
Okay, that's a timeless one too. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible the special effects they were able to achieve at that time.
I admire it for that reason, but the ick factor is so much that I'm like, no.
And yeah, so what? I don't know. Like, well, what got you past that? Because I mean, this is like a movie with a lot of body horror and ick.
Yeah, the thing that got me into the Alien franchise, it was a couple things. I had seen Ridley Scott's Blade Runner before this, and so I was sort of interested in this period of his filmography because Ridley Scott changes a lot over the years, and he's got his different eras. And I had seen both Blade Runner and Legend, and they both have. And I'm not necessarily totally in love with either of them. As far as Blade Runner goes, I'm a much bigger fan of Denis' sequel. But there's something about the atmosphere of both films that have this like really creepy 80s vibe because the 80s are inherently creepy. But no, it's something about the style. So it was like, well, I gotta see Alien, even though it's that's not really my thing. But
I think in the 80s, like everything was blue. They just tinted everything blue to make it creepy.
Yeah, and to be fair, before somebody calls me out on it, yes, Alien came out in 1979, not the actual 80s. But yeah, I wanted to check that out, and that was the one of those early films of his that I really fell in love with and the horror worked for me because of the setup of it being in space. So it was science fiction, and also there's a genuine reason for this story to exist because it's a haunted house movie in which there really is nowhere to go. They're stuck on that ship in space. So it completely worked for me on that level. And because the horror was combined with science fiction, I think that was my way into it. and then I just went right into this one because I think I'd rented both DVDs. This was back in I want to say 2004 maybe, and like both movies really scared me. But this one was so freaking the first Alien is very creepy and slow and you're waiting for something to jump up behind you. Aliens is just an all-out assault on your senses where you're not allowed to chill for a second. And yeah, and then when I saw it again a few years later when it came out on Blu-ray, that's when I really fell head over heels in love with the movie, because in addition to it just being a wonderful thrill ride, it's a really beautiful film the way it's shot. And yeah, I would credit the Alien franchise with being the thing that got me into trying some horror stuff. I don't think I ever would have watched something like The Witch without sort of breaking into it with Alien. So and I know that's weird because they are very different, obviously, but it was, what's the word for, I'm blanking out on the word, but it was a way of dipping my toes into the genre. So now I'm open to certain things. But Jared, what's your history with Aliens?
Yeah, first, just because Kate reminded me in the chat, I will issue a minor correction to my own record. The last time we had a guest on this channel was actually when we had Dan on to talk about X-Men 97 in May, right. So that was a couple of months after. But in terms of my own history with the Alien and Aliens franchise, so I think I saw it for the first time around 2011 and 2012. My family were not big horror aficionados. This was not a movie that I grew up watching. It was a movie I grew up hearing about, in particular because my mother, who had not seen very many movies, but had seen Alien at one point, and it freaked the hell out of her. So that was not a movie she was going to expose me to. But I think the thing that finally got me over the edge to watch the Aliens movies was, I think it was either my senior year in college or the first year of med school around 2011, 2012, when Prometheus was going to be coming out. And I saw the first trailer for Prometheus, which, your feelings on the movie aside, which I think has a lot of great things in it, even if it's not entirely successful. That first trailer for Prometheus is one of the best movie trailers ever, frankly, in my opinion. And it got me so hyped to dive into this world. And I'm like, well, then I got to see all the Alien movies. So I actually, one weekend, I went out to my local Walmart. Oh, great, Kate. Yeah, it was a great show and a great discussion with Dan. I went out to my local Walmart, and back in the days when physical media was not an endangered species, they would have those giant bargain bins of DVDs, and a lot of times even combo packs that were there for very cheap, particularly for the older movies. So that weekend, I picked up this double pack DVD of Alien and Aliens for $7.50. It was probably the best $7.50 I ever spent in my life because it introduced me to two of my all-time favorite movies. Watching Alien the first time, I was completely enthralled. It is one of the rare movies that I would happily say is perfect. I cannot think of a single frame I would change in that movie. It is thrilling. It is terrifying. It is, innovative. It is the best horror film and the best science fiction film, I might argue. And it would seem almost impossible that its sequel could live up to it. But Aliens does. Aliens does, and is almost in its own way a perfect movie in its own right, with the caveat that I will say that I had on this, DVD, it has the director's cut of Aliens. So I saw the director's cut first. And once I went back and watched the theatrical cut, I'm like, nope, it's going to be the director's cut for me from here on out for that movie. because there's some essential emotional material in the director's cut of Aliens that I think, unfortunately, got cut for time out of the theatrical release that I think really needs to be in the movie to make it as powerful as it is. But it as people have often called it, one of the best action movies ever, which I would agree. It is still incredibly scary. But overall, when I think about this movie, I think about a quote that James Cameron had kind of talked about when he was talking about his philosophy in designing the creatures and how to make them scary and effective. And it's an idea of motion over design. These, the original Alien costume, as we may know, that was worn in the original movie, it was very, sophisticated, but it was also somewhat limiting in its movements. The actor who was portraying it, I'm gonna pull up his name because he's an essential part of the Balaji Badejo, who was wearing the suit in the Alien movies. He was a very tall, thin man, and it made his physicality look very alien and unique. But he couldn't move very fast in that suit. So they really made the scenes. They built the scenes around the effectiveness of what you don't see, which is what, of course, makes it so indelible. And the thing about Aliens being that there are going to be not only many aliens, but the entire new sub variations like the Queen that we have never seen before. One of the things that James Cameron wanted to do is he really wanted the actors wearing the suits to be able to move so they could feel dangerous. And to do that, he kind of he sacrificed some of the intricate detailing of the suit so that the actors could have more mobility. And then he compensated for that with quick cuts and innovative camera work. And the result is staggering because it's very, in contrast to the original Aliens, one of the reasons these two movies feel so different, but also of a piece, is the aliens feel dangerous in an entirely different way. But they're constantly coming at you from all directions, and it makes you feel overwhelmed and frightened in a different way that if you're being hunted by one lone creature. In this case, the danger is very much in the numbers. And overall, I think it was the brilliant evolution for the sequel to take. And of course, it allowed for the ascension of one Sigourney Weaver into superstardom, because while she, was incredible in Aliens, this is the movie that made her one of the greatest action stars of all time. And my single favorite Oscar nomination ever is the fact that the Academy, in their sometimes questionable wisdom, but brilliant in this case, saw fit to nominate Sigourney Weaver for Best Actress for this movie in 1986. A stroke of brilliance, and has rarely been more deserved.
Yeah, it's to think that they did that back then. It's another thing, to think in 2003. This is a very different nomination, obviously, very different genre, but it's easier to swallow that in the year that they were showering all the awards on the big fantasy film Lord of the Rings, that they also gave a Best Actor nomination to Johnny Depp for Pirates of the Caribbean, which is another bravo, because that was just such an outrageous performance. But genre stuff felt like that's recent enough to where it feels like, yeah, that seems like it could happen. But all the way back in the 80s, for a horror film, that was a big deal, and incredibly well deserved. I do want to just follow up on what you were saying a little earlier about the special edition of this film. I like both versions, but I think the special edition is very much the more emotional movie because it has all those character bits. You end the movie really feeling like the survivors have turned into this family unit almost, which again, I'll hold off until later, but that's where my feelings about Alien 3 start to come out. but yeah, no, I think that's what this movie has that the first one doesn't, where the first one is very much a horror film. It's about who's going to survive to the end. This does feel like it's delving a bit deeper into these characters and getting us to root for them in a different way. And plus it's just a banger of a cast. I mean, just have to love these characters. So yeah. We were just talking about Sigourney Weaver. I think like I always get pumped up when she goes down to rescue Newt, and she's like, "We're not leaving yet," and she's getting the guns ready, and she's going down the elevator, and I'm like, hell yeah, this is an action hero. And yeah, but I'm gonna jump into oh, by the way, hi Danny. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. I think we'll just jump all over the place with this movie. I'm gonna call out Laura right now for this comment because I'm sorry. What? Yeah, what's a little bit of murder? Yeah, real easy to say that behind the keyboard. You're not having to defend yourself in real time. Let's talk about Carter Burke. Played by Paul Reiser, who comes in the beginning of the film and automatically oh, this is one sleazy son of a bitch. Yeah. I work for the company, but don't let that fool you. I'm really an okay guy. And I'm like, pretty sure you're not.
Wise detective.
But he is, without a doubt, also the biggest clue that this movie was made in the 80s. As soon as I'm always like deep into the movie in the first few minutes, and then he walks through the door, and I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm being pulled out for a second. This is a 1980s movie. But he's great. He does such a great job playing that weaselly, But no, Laura, he's not.
I'm really gonna have to find her reasons for why he was right.
And even though he's like not necessarily saying the wrong things in the beginning of the movie, but it's just the way he says them that it's like, no, you're not okay. And yeah. Which, by the way, like this movie starts off with like, everybody giving Ripley a bunch of shit and not believing her. It's like, have they not all read the script? And like, they change their tune real quick once things go quiet on the planet. And all of a sudden, she's their only hope.
It may be the future, but insurance companies still suck. So
I think that's the kind of the part of the timeless quality of it. It's like you have a company that, like the first movie, we have blue collar workers and a mining company, and it just feels like so familiar and grounded in reality. Like we know these people already. We know they're not so far off in the distant future where everything is so different. In fact, most of it is pretty much the same.
Except they wear their collars up.
Because
that's how you know it's the future.
Yeah. But I mean, like it's never really spoken of directly. I don't think in the first two movies. It's like we're aware of this company and we're aware that they have an interest in the alien creature, but it's like that's the real evil intent in the movie. It's the company. The aliens are just animals. They're just creatures doing their thing. of surviving and eating, reproducing. They don't have, from what appears to be, any kind of malicious intent. They're just animals. But the real bad guys are the company. And
yeah, and Ripley has the line that sums it all up when she tells Burke, I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them fucking each other over for a percentage, which he has rightly earned that level of scorn by this point in the movie. Somewhat facetiously, one could joke that maybe one of the reasons Burke was right when he's arguing no, this is clearly an important species we're dealing with. I don't think anyone has the right to just arbitrarily exterminate them. And then the Marines are like, oh yeah, watch us. But that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek argument there, because obviously his motives are not pure. He wants the company. He wants it for the bioweapons division, and as we see throughout the rest of the franchise, these aliens, when deployed as weapons, can be quite deadly. But I think that the reason that what Paul Reiser's Burke and the entire and other insurance companies, and the corporation in the beginning of the movie, why it's so effective, is because it kind of underlines just how incredibly rare and traumatic that the events of the original movie were, because we were there with Ripley as she went through the worst experience of her life and watched her friends and coworkers be mercilessly hunted down and killed by this creature, this alien that no one had ever encountered before. But then she gets back to civilization that she had been trying to get much later than she thought she would, and that's a big reason for the disconnect as well, that she's been out for 57 years. But the fact that no one believes her initially is kind of one of those, things that is frustrating by design, and it makes us much more sympathetic to Ripley as a character even more than we were, because we sympathized with her before primarily because we just wanted her to survive. Now we want her to be believed, and we want her to be vindicated. And we see also, and particularly early in the movie, just how traumatized she is by what she went through. She wakes up every night in cold sweats, screaming, imagining a chest burster is going to come through her and kill her. And we know that, and that's one of the reasons she will agree to go back, is so that she can face it. But it's also so to prove that yes, this experience happened, and I was right. I survived this, and I'm not going to let anyone tell me anymore what I went through. And it's that authority that allows her to take charge and basically save everybody later in the movie. So frustrating as these initial scenes can be, when the corporate bureaucrats led by Van Leeuwen are kind of questioning her, airing her integrity out in public, it's essential, a starting place for the movie, because it just underlines the fact that what Ripley went through was an extraordinary experience, and now that we're going to be revisiting that experience, the game is going to be raised even higher.
And also, I just also want to say that part of what's so brilliant about the opening of this film, and in some ways, this is when I get into I love both versions of the movie, because what the original version of the movie does is, instead of cutting our way back to LV-426, we stay in Ripley's POV, and we don't really leave it. And so we're kind of there with her in her trauma all the way. And because, not so much now, because I've lived with the movie for so long, so I'm it doesn't I'm still very tense watching it, but there's not the the trauma, because the first couple times I saw this movie, and the first one especially, it was so traumatic to sort of sit through. And so it almost feels like we're there with Ripley in these opening scenes. We're back in a supposedly safe environment, but we're still living with the nightmare of the first movie. And so as an audience member, we kind of sympathize with, like, when she wakes up from a nightmare, we're like, yeah, we're still feeling it too, Ripley. And so to then go back to that planet and to face it again, it's such a the way this movie gets set up, and and has that tension sort of boiling over. It's just absolutely brilliant. And there's great moments when she's entering into the compound, when they land on the planet, and there's that beat where she's standing outside before she goes in, and then when she enters in, she's like slowly stepping through, and that James Horner music is going dum dum. And it's really making sure that you're freaked out with her. Which, by the way, hats off to the great James Horner, because even though there's more than a couple instances of some liberally borrowed classical music in some parts of this movie, it's one of his best, because it's the intensity of the music is insane. And that last bit of music that's used when Ripley's trying not to get sucked out of the airlock, I think that's been used in like 5 billion trailers. So it's classic music. It's just fantastic. Yeah, okay, but before I digressed into the music, what was I talking? Oh yeah, the tension. And that pretty much carries through the rest of the movie. In fact, the special edition makes it worse, because it adds those bits of the aliens trying to get into the compound and them fending them off with the sentry guns. And so there is in that version of the movie, there is like no time to breathe. Like, they're constantly under threat. And so that's just a brilliant example of James Cameron wanting to, again, traumatize us. So, Kate, watch the movie, please.
Yeah, no, the pacing of this movie is interesting, because when you watch the special edition director's cut, it's over a 2.5 hour movie, which is one of the reasons it was cut down for its theatrical release. But if you exclude the face huggers and the dream sequences, the actual aliens don't show up until the 73-minute mark of this movie. But even before then, the tension is just off the charts, because the horror of the first movie is so indelible, and we know they're there. We know that our heroes are going to be encountering them, and every time they're moving through this deserted complex and discovering, the horrors and the absence of horrors in the form of the absence of the bodies of the colonists, the tension is just increasing and increasing and increasing. And then, of course, once we actually encounter the aliens, it just becomes an almost nonstop cavalcade, hey Eric, of like basically anything that can go wrong should go wrong, and as soon as you solve one problem, another problem crops up, and like we're very steadily losing characters, even like small characters in like the lesser known Marines who we haven't gotten to spend as much time with. We feel every single one of their deaths, because we know that it's they're getting chipped away, and then by the time we reach the final sequences, this movie almost has and we'll talk about it more once we get there, but a lesser movie could have ended at any number of this movie has 3 places where it could have ended, but kind of like the first movie, it gives you that climactic confrontation, then it gives you another one, and then it gives you another one, and it just makes you feel like you can't breathe until it's over. And it's remarkable.
It's interesting that Laura brings this up about the fact that there's a child in the equation. I remember the review by Siskel and Ebert skewered that part of the movie, because they were like, oh, it's just terrible that they're using a child to scare the audience, and And I think they had a real problem with the fact that it was like, who would want to watch this? It's just it's such a miserable thing to sit through. And I'm like, you're not familiar with horror movie audiences,
It's
are
not.
Not one of Siskel and Ebert's better takes.
They didn't have that many.
Oh,
At least not where they both got it right. I do want to.
Well, I mean,
I want to jump back because I just remembered I missed a question that Laura posed. Who amongst us would be most likely to survive on LV 426? Sure as hell wouldn't be me.
I don't think my chances are very good, but I sure would like to use a flamethrower for a little while.
Then again, I think I would be the first to hide with Newt, so maybe I would be okay.
Yeah, I couldn't crawl through those ducts. I'm too tall, so yeah, I would have had to find a place to make a heroic last stand somewhere.
I know Laura would survive because she wouldn't even go into space in the first place, because that's a big nope. We both agree on nothing good happens in space. So
I mean, I'd put bets on her even if she was there on the planet. Don't mess with Laura.
No,
like, she'll obliterate those aliens. So,
but Laura and I have watched a lot of sci-fi and horror movies together, and we both just kind of agree what goes on in space is just none of our business. We just really don't need to know.
Yeah, I mean, well, and this is what I sort of went back to when I was talking about horror movies. I think a lot of my issues with most horror movies is like, I would never be in that situation. So like, you've already lost me. So that's the thing. It has to, like, the horror movies that I like there has to be a valid reason for why.
You got no choice to be there.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, oh, the wall just started bleeding, I'm noping out of here. Like no, I mean, like, you really are stuck there. But yeah, I could definitely see that with Alien.
Yeah. We were talking to Jared. You mentioned the characters that we get to know, and like the even the characters that we do lose fairly early on. Like, no, we don't like spend in-depth time with them, but they are all such colorful characters that they're fun to watch, and so we immediately, like, we can assign a very distinct personality to each of them, and they're great. Like, I just think, like, one of my favorite parts is just when they all wake up and Apone is already pulling out a cigar. And then he's like, come on, what y'all waiting for?
Another glorious day in the Corps.
And then later on, come on, you heard the man, you know the drill, assholes and elbows. It's like, is just little, yeah. I love him so much, and it is a shame that we lose him early on. But then you've got, obviously, Hicks is one of our main characters. He sticks around, as well as Hudson, the great Bill Paxton. May he rest in peace. Just game over, man. Game over. What the hell are we gonna do now? And yeah, and Vasquez, and all these other wonderful characters. Gorman, worst mission commander ever. He's completely useless until the end. Yeah, but these are all just such fun characters that you do feel bad when they start getting exterminated.
Yeah.
But it's like nobody's listening to Ripley at that point in the movie, and it's like, for the love of God, if she says get them out of there, get them out.
Yeah, but she's a civilian. They're Marines, so it's like they don't think what she thinks is a threat is really a threat to them. But
yeah. Which, by the way, it should said that these Marines do not act like any Marines ever. But James Cameron has admitted that he screwed up that.
Well,
they're not exactly.
Well, I mean,
they're not exactly. What's respectful of the chain of command.
No. No, and as Hudson once inquired, how do I get out of this chicken shit outfit? Perhaps these are not the finest colonial Marines that the company has to offer, but they are colorful characters, and we do feel like the bonds between the squad. That's one of the reasons it makes it so effective as we start to lose them. It's been documented that basically all the actors, except for Michael Biehn, because he was cast a little bit later, but all the actors who played the Marines went through basically boot camp together to kind of instill not only the military habits, but also the sense of camaraderie. And it really comes out in like their individual interactions, like for instance, the bond that Vasquez shares with Drake. And like we only get a few beats of that, but like the respect and affection between the two of them is very prominent, and it makes Drake's death hurt, which is notable because I had seen Shawshank Redemption before Aliens, and the actor who plays Drake, Mark Ralston, plays perhaps the most loathsome character in that movie, with the exception of the Warden. So the moment I saw him, I'm like, oh well, he's going to be just a dick here. But no, he actually it's notable that even while certain characters like Hudson are kind of giving Vasquez crap for her gender and her appearance, Drake is all in on Vasquez and she's all in on him. Like their bond is very real and sweet actually.
Now you guys are trying to coax me back into D&D because that actually sounds awesome.
Yeah. That really does sound awesome.
No, I will say that actor played by Mark Ralston. Yeah, he's been in so many things, and I always hate him just because of the Shawshank Redemption. Because I will never he does play a pretty loathsome character in that. So even when he has a bit part in the beginning of Ahsoka, I know he's part of the Rebel Alliance and he seems like a good guy, but I'm fine if he dies. Oh God, unfortunately some actors have that one role that they're always known for. I
think of all of them, all the cast of Marines. I think Jeanette Goldstein's Vasquez just is the one that stands out the most. She ate, as the kids say.
Oh, she's great.
She steals every scene that she's in. I mean, her gender is kind of ambiguous, but that's great. A lot of people read some. I mean, back then, to be able to for a lot of people to be able to identify with Vasquez in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jeanette Goldstein, and she was fantastic in. She has a small part, but when she's in Terminator 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I knew.
I don't know. There's something about her.
I was like, oh, it's John Connor's mom.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really wonderful characters. Unfortunately, a lot of them do bite it early. But you really do feel like they've been with each other for a while, and they all trust each other, and they've got each other's backs, and unfortunately they just have never come up against something like this, and then of course at the very last minute they're told they can't fire their weapons. They can only use flamethrowers. That turns out to be a not so great.
Yeah, and the fact that Gorman doesn't explain why they can't fire their weapons, yeah, that's one of those like, come on, man, moments. Because it makes sense, it's like they got good reasons not to fire them, but obviously Vasquez and Drake are like, fuck that, and things go wrong from there. But yeah, the fact that the actors all have like that very authentic bond, and those little actors and those little moments in the barracks and things in before they get to LV 426 kind of help sell that sell those moments where even if we don't get to know some of the characters as well as others, we see that they all have relationships with one another. Things like I think some of the ones who don't get as much shine are people like Crow and Dietrich and Farrow, and Spunkmeyer and Wisbowski, although their names help them stand out because of all the most of these are very like straightforward names, like Frost and things, and then we've got Spunkmeyer, who poor guy, and he and Farrow don't make the greatest end either, even if it's off camera, but it makes it.
Farrow gets some really good moments, though. Even before she dies, she gets the great 5x5 line that takes me back to Faith in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Exactly.
And then unfortunately she gets really good death.
Yes, she does.
But yeah, it's wonderful cast. Now let's not forget the other member of the crew, Bishop, played by the legendary Lance Henriksen. Because oh my God, and it's a tall order playing an android in this franchise because there's a lot of heavy hitters that have gotten a turn at that. And yeah, let me see if I can. And here we go. Yeah, I do have a picture of him. I love Bishop again. Sorry, the stream is going to occasionally have me crapping on Alien 3, and even though we get more Lance Henriksen in Alien 3 than any of the other. Non-Ripley survivors of this movie, but still not the way I wanted to see him in the follow-up. But he rocks in this movie, and it very much playing that you don't know whether you can trust him, because at this point in the franchise, the only other android we've known is Ash, played by the great Ian Holm, and Ash is absolutely not trustworthy in any way, shape, or form. And so for a lot of the movie, you really are like, this Bishop guy looks creepy, and he does a great job of conveying creepy. But in the end, we see that no, actually, his programming is pretty good because he comes through. But I just love his performance so much. He's always been one of my favorite actors, especially in genre stuff. I mean, he's just great.
Yeah. No, I really love his performance as well, because, as you pointed out, he is unsettling because we learn that he's an android up front, as opposed to Ash, where that reveal comes as a surprise. But he also, even from the early, start of it, we start to see that he has a little bit more depth and humanity than Ash probably ever did. When they're talking about the fact that it's common practice to always have a synthetic on board, and he has the line, "I prefer the term artificial person myself." And then obviously they lean into our prior connections with Ian Holm's Ash and his fascination with the aliens when he's dissecting the face hugger, and yes, that is the way movies work. And he seems very intrigued. He's magnificent, is it? And you're like, oh no, we've seen this movie before. But it turns out we actually haven't, because he has more of a connection to the squad. And to Ripley, ultimately, Ripley is obviously quite suspicious of him, rightly so in the beginning, but he, seeing him kind of earn her trust and respect over the course of the movie, not only by like just being there, but by his actions, it's a great little sub story throughout the movie, and like that moment where he volunteers to go reroute the dish to get the shuttle down from the Sulaco, like that's a really like heroic moment. And I will say that him going into the pipe is like my pure nightmare fuel. Like
I was gonna say, you want to talk about trauma? Oh my God! Every time I watch that, again, I'm like, no, no, because like that's not just a tight space. That's like. It's like I would not be able to move and I would freak out and just wish I was dead.
Yeah, and they seal him inside. And when he's like, it'll take 40 minutes to crawl down there, crawl 180 meters. I'm like, 40 minutes? No, it's a good thing he is not a biological human. Because I don't think a real human would have fared that well.
Well, and okay, here's a question to pose since we already mentioned the Shawshank Redemption. What do you want, a clean, compact pipe like we see in this, or a bit more spacious pipe that Andy Dufresne has to crawl through with all the shit that's in there? Which are you voting for?
I'll take the shit pipe, to be honest, because like as gross as that is, and I'll be like heaving the entire way. The idea of being that closed in, no, that'll just. I'll just stop and have just die. Just
Yep. We're aligned. Give me the shit. The shit smelling foulness. Even if it's longer distance of 5 football fields, because my single greatest fear is getting stuck in a tight, confined space with not being able to move. That's why I don't fuck with caves. No caves for me.
I'll have the will to live. Pipe. I will not have the will to live if I'm like that confined. Like
I think we're all in the same place. I mean, I wouldn't completely know until I'm presented with it in the moment, but I feel like my fear of claustrophobia, that would be worse.
Yeah.
And since Eric brought up the fact that the great actor who plays Ash, and wouldn't be a stream without a Lord of the Rings connection. Yes, Bilbo Baggins himself. I want to kind of expand this out to the larger franchise. Who is your guys' favorite portrayal of an android in this series?
I mean, I think it's Bishop for me, Lance Henriksen, because of the depth of humanity that I alluded to earlier. Like obviously they have. I think in terms of pure performance, it's hard to argue against Michael Fassbender and his work in the Prometheus and Covenant, but because he really becomes like almost the star of that movie. And Ian Holm is wonderful, but I think Bishop is just the one I have the greatest connection to. Although I will say that, having just seen Alien Romulus, David Johnson as Andy is really, really good too.
Yeah, I would say, I'm going to say Bishop. But after seeing Alien Romulus, like Andy, I think is now my favorite, because like his performance is playing two very different characters in the same person. So that was a amazing addition to the Aliens family. I really liked Romulus. God,
now you guys are making me doubt my resolve in getting the digital version of Alien Romulus, because I'm like, I really want to see, especially that performance again. But I just have to hold on.
But if I'm going to be trollish, I'm going to say Winona Ryder.
You know what? I will never begrudge Winona Ryder anything, even though she might her character might not be at the top of the list for me. You know, Winona Ryder was in an Alien movie, and I think that's pretty cool.
I almost want to go with Ian Holm just because, like, he's been left out in the cold, kind of.
I mean, he's the original, yeah.
Yeah, but if I'm honest with myself, it has to be Fassbender, because what a twisted robot he is, and Fassbender just has such, like, seems like he's having such delicious fun with the part, and he delights in, you know, being particularly evil, but also just this. But he's also just this robot who's curious about the way things work, and why am I considered inferior when my creator is clearly, you know, inferior, and I just love how much creepier, progressively creepier he gets, and I'm still hoping that we're not done with his character in the franchise, because I think David is one of the best parts of the Alien franchise, even if the movies he's in are certainly not perfect, but I think there's a lot to like in them, and David is like number one amongst those wonderful things. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Fassbender, but you know, we got to pay our respects to Ian Holm, because Ash was the first, and he's a legend as well. You know what? I'll always take Brent Spiner. You got to go with something you've seen, right, Kate? So, although I'm actually surprised that if she has actually seen any Star Trek. Yeah. So, well, of course she has, because of Dan. Like, I don't think that relationship would work if she didn't watch Star Trek stuff.
I'm so glad to hear that the Next Generation was not too spicy for you.
We want to make this conversation really different. We can crack open the theory that Alien and Blade Runner take place in the same universe, and then we have a whole other cadre of androids to choose from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I went off of just this movie for a bit, so let's actually pause for a second. I don't know whether this is the mid-roll or not, but let's just pretend like it is, at least. Plus, we have a guest today, so I feel like we don't want this to be one of our 4-hour streams. But yeah, so thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We're having a blast, and we're going to continue on having a blast. As for next week, we're taking a bit of a turn. We've been in the 80s for a couple weeks now. We're going to go more contemporary next week. We're going to be talking about the first season of the Netflix animated series Arcane in preparation for season 2. Somebody let Stev know, because he might actually drop by for once. But yeah, I absolutely adore this series, and I owe that to Stev, because he didn't quite guilt me into watching it, but he did keep saying how great it was. And then one week I was like, it was after we did a discussion of The Bad Batch, which I love. He didn't really respond to it too much. So I was like, you know what? I owe him one. Well, I'll check out Arcane. And then it ended up being one of the greatest pieces of not just animation, but just what would you call it? Sci-fi or dystopian, storytelling, ever. It's just absolutely amazing. I don't know if you've started watching it yet, Jared, but I really hope you enjoy it, because in my opinion, it's one hell of a ride. So. Yeah,
I just started the first episode actually earlier this weekend. So far, so good. I can already tell that the style is going to be something that we're going to talk about in detail, because it is one of the more striking animated shows
Yeah, and I will tell you that, like, the first episode is very good, but it's nothing compared to, like, I don't think you really get an idea for what the show is until, like, the second episode. And so, yeah, I can't wait to talk about it with you. And, yeah, let me see. Yeah, I thought so. I mean, that's the definition
That is
of
super cool.
Yeah.
That is goals. Hashtag goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will tell everybody right now, please, if you haven't watched Arcane, check it out and come chat with us next week, because it's so great. And
I think if you want to get kicked over and over in the feels, watch Arcane in the best way.
Well, it's so funny because, and I talked about this when Steph and I did the stream on it, but I was going through a really crappy time that week because I think it was it must have been right after. I'm not sure. Maybe just before, right after we lost our dog Sam, and I was mad at my dad because, when it comes to stuff, when you have to put down a pet, sometimes you're the one who's like, no, I don't think it's time yet. And you decide to just be mad at the person who's actually being responsible. And that was me that week. And so I was really upset. And I was like, first, I can't remember if Steph gave me hints or what, but I knew, like, it was going to be an emotional investment to get into the show. And I was like, you know what? Let me channel all this shit that I'm going through and just be traumatized by something else. And and it worked. So, like, and the show's not all, like, there's a lot of trauma and deep feels, but it's also just an awesome ride. And yeah, but especially be ready for episode 3. Episode 3 will make you feel things. But yeah, so we're gonna have a blast doing that. And I don't recall if we've nailed down, or I think the week after that we're taking it off, right, Jared?
Yeah. So that's on me. The weekend of November 10th, I'm actually going to be running a half marathon here in Monterey Bay, and my entire family is going to be in town because a lot of us are running it together, and then we're all going to go out to dinner and everything. So I think it's probably just easier if we're not trying to coordinate the stream around all that, especially because the topics of that we've got coming up after that are two that we're going to want to spend a good long time on, because while we haven't nailed down dates, John and I have committed to talking in some order about the HBO show, The Penguin, the spinoff of the Batman that we're both just loving and thinking is spectacular. And then we're also going to be talking about the 10th anniversary this upcoming month of the Christopher Nolan classic Interstellar. And I think that those are both going to be really long streams, so I think it's probably for the best if we if I'm not putting an artificial time clock on us. So we'll take the weekend of the 10th off, and then we're going to do The Penguin and Interstellar in some order, I believe.
And then before the year's done, we're still kind of figuring it out, but most likely we'll be getting to the Netflix Keira Knightley series Black Doves, because it's Keira Knightley, so of course we will. And then Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim pretty much as soon as it comes out. So that's non-negotiable right there. I don't think either one of us has a problem with that. But speaking of which, Trish, have you been watching the Penguin? Because I know
I don't have HBO right now, but thank you for the suggestion. So yeah,
so good.
Okay, yeah. I will put that. I'll put that on the list. I just finished up.
Kristen Milioti especially is like, oh my god! I mean, it goes without saying that Colin Farrell is like phenomenal as he was in the film, and he just is amazing. But yeah, Kristen Milioti as Sophia Falcone is like, oh my god. Just like she's terrifying, but she's also like, oh my god, is she okay? And like you just want to see her take everybody down, and it's just such a phenomenal show. So
Okay.
Her performance in the 4th episode, Sentani, is on a short list of like best television performances I've seen in the last 10 years. So good stuff for
yeah. So yeah, that's more or less what we're doing for the rest of the year. Like I said, we haven't quite figured out the order for everything, but I think the next two, the next couple weeks are pretty much locked down. Like we haven't figured. I guess we haven't figured out if we're doing Interstellar or The Penguin first, or what we're going to do there. So, but we'll let you know as soon as we figure everything out. Yeah, no, she's great. I've pretty much thought she was amazing ever since How I Met Your Mother, and I didn't even watch that show regularly. So, so yeah. Okay, let's dive back into the movie. Let's talk about like one of the big huge parts of this movie, which is Newt, played by Carrie Henn, who is just like so great. Like just they mostly come at night, mostly. And just like she's so great, and it's so like back like now we have had stuff like Game of Thrones and a bunch of other shows where we become kind of used to really amazing child actors, but I feel like for a really long time child actors were just called upon to look cute, and and they didn't necessarily have to be all that great. But her performance is just stunning and amazing, and and she has these scenes with Sigourney Weaver. She's just holding her own. She's fantastic. And then of course, like as mentioned earlier, having a child in jeopardy for much of this movie just puts us on edge even more. Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like I feel like the heart of this movie is that there's a family unit that's kind of formed, with a number of these characters, and it just adds an emotional depth that is, I feel, not, I guess maybe as you, not so much wholly unique now that we've had Alien Romulus, and I feel like that obviously has a family element to it, but it is kind of one of the big things about this movie that makes it stand apart. And yeah, I thought she was great, and then of course in the special edition there's the added layer that Ripley has lost her daughter, Newt has lost her mother along with her father and brother, and so I think it's great because they're both kind of looking for something that they've lost, and it just makes these two characters bond, in a really great way. So I just love the part that she plays in this film.
Yeah, sorry, Jerry, go ahead if you want
to. No, you go ahead, please.
No, I was just thinking, yeah, she doesn't, like, for a long time, especially during the 80s, a lot of child actors just played it precocious just to be precocious, and that is probably one of, I mean, when you're dealing with, you can see the portrayal of trauma behind that, behind her eyes, and I don't know how they managed to pull that off with a child actor, because that's usually, how do you ask a child actor to tap into something that maybe like is very dark, and portray that. But she does it so well. But I also think there's definitely a theme of the motherhood in this movie. So I don't think it was just, oh, let's just stick a child actor in there to raise the stakes, you know?
Yeah.
There's a theme of motherhood where, you know, Ripley, you know, has to, you know, tap into her maternal feelings and to be motivated to rescue you and keep her safe. Kind of like she's the only one that really is like these Marines. They're protective, but they're not exactly maternal either. So they're very rough, and you know, and Ripley brings a softness and a sensitivity to Newt. Whereas, you know, and that's something also unique of action heroes. They don't typically are allowed to play both ways, like being, you know, soft and motherly, or, you know, and you know, tough as nails too. But then you also have, you know, this juxtaposed with the queen alien, who's also a mother protecting her babies, and a different type of motherhood here. Like,
oh, that show off is just so great, where they're both like, okay, are we just going to like respect, you know, each other's motherhood and like back away, and then no, that doesn't happen. But yeah, no, it's great. And I will say I do like, is the reason why I feel like it, you know, kind of feels like the movie builds up a family unit, is that while most of the Marines kind of like, they protect her, but they're not really, you know, they're not doing what Ripley is doing. Although I will say, with a little bit of an exception, I feel like Hicks is really looking out for her, and he's like, you know, be careful with that, it's dangerous, and kind of lifting her up on the counter so she can see what's going on. And so I do like that there is, you know, even without the sort of romantic vibes that we do kind of get a bit between Ripley and Hicks, there is this kind of dynamic where he's being a little bit fatherly towards her, not to the degree that Ripley is, you know, is taking care of her, but there is a little bit of that, and so I enjoyed that. And yeah, I will say again, talk about being completely useless, is Gorman. They're trying to get Newt to talk first, and he's just awful. It's like, come on, say something. It's like, it's no use. Total brain lock.
Yeah.
We're wasting our time.
Yeah. Which is, you know, not a good moment for his character, but it's one of the things that's making Carrie Henn's performance as Newt authentic. You know, not to get heavy, but like, I've worked in a few pediatric ERs. I've seen traumatized children before. This is how they act. And like, as Trish was pointing out, like, this is how, like, to get this out of Carrie Henn, who was not really a professional actor. You know, she famously did really not go on to do many movies after this, and went on to have other interests. But she is playing a child who has gone through the worst hell that you could ever imagine, losing her family in this, and everyone she ever knew, really, in this horrific fashion. And so, of course, it's, you know, when the movie starts, she's almost feral and, you know, very, you know, ready to run and at the drop of a hat. And it's Ripley's softness and, you know, maternal instincts that really kind of coax her out of her shell and gives us a sense of that more vibrant girl who used to be there. And their connection really is the heart of the movie. One of the reasons, as I think I alluded to, that I consider the Alien special edition that I need, you know, like, I always will watch that if preferable to the theatrical, is specifically because the theatrical version cuts out the scenes alluding to Ripley's daughter. And I think that is really was, you know, again, the movie obviously works without it, but that gives the movie so much more power. You know, those opening scenes in the, because we had no idea that Ripley had a family. We knew nothing about her life back on Earth in the first movie. We just knew we wanted her to survive because we liked her. But for her to get there, you know, and one of the first things she's asking about, is there any news about my daughter? And that scene when Burke, you know, gives her the information that, you know, Amanda Ripley McLaren, married name, you know, age 66, and that was at the time of her death, which was 2 years ago. And Ripley having that moment of just quietly saying, well, first of all, calling her Amy and looking at her like picture of her as the older woman, and then saying, I promised I'd be home for her birthday, her 11th birthday. It just, your heart shatters in that moment for her. And it's a wound that, like, is, when you watch this movie knowing that about Ripley, like, it makes the trauma that she's going through feel even more immediate, because it's not just that she like went through this horrific experience with the alien, it's that she lost everything. She lost the most important person in the world to her, and she never got to say goodbye. And Newt is going through something similar. So the instincts, you know, the moments where Ripley is able to coax that, you know, that those moments out of Newt, like, it's not just because she's a woman and therefore she has the natural maternal instinct. It's that she had a daughter who was essentially Newt's age, who she will now never get to know. And while Newt isn't exactly a replacement for her, you know, she is someone who needs Ripley in that way, not as necessarily like the consultant or the badass action hero, but just as someone who's looking out for her. And those, you know, those moments when like they're lying down in the bed, and Newt is asking about how babies come, and you know, it's different than the alien chest burster, obviously. And she asks Ripley, like, you know, did you ever have a baby? And she's like, I did. And she's like, what happened to her? She's gone. And that's all that, you know, she needs to say. But it's, you know, it's one of Sigourney Weaver's best moments. And obviously her desire to save Newt is like, she could have just wanted to save her even if she didn't have that connection, but it makes it feel more immediate that they've chosen her. And it makes the moment, like at the very end, after Ripley has defeated the alien queen and the iconic face-offs of the mothers and the famous "get away from her, you bitch" line, you know, the moment when Ripley, you know, has thrown the alien out of the airlock, and she crawls like over to Newt, and what does Newt do? She calls her mommy. And I missed that the first time that I saw the movie. The second time it made me tear up. And, you know, obviously we will have a separate conversation about how Alien 3 handles that. But like, it's because I, like you, Trish, I actually do like a lot about Alien 3.
I'm sorry, what's Alien 3? I'm unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. But in terms of like the ending sequence, like the connection between the two, you know, the movie ends on them, and the connection of the idea of like, Newt asking Ripley, can I dream now? And Ripley telling her, yes, I think we both can. Like, that doesn't land as well for me if we don't know about the story with Ripley's daughter, which is why I think it's essential backstory. And while the movie would be a great action movie without it, as the theatrical version is, like, this is the heart of it. And this is why I think the special edition is the superior version.
Yeah, and so just to tap into, you know, Kate posed this question, and I think you kind of addressed it there. You know, the original version does have, you know, Ripley as, you know, as someone who wasn't a mother, you know, who's, you know, moves into that maternal role. You know, that's certainly a discussion to have. 86 was a very different time in that regard. But I don't know. I'm probably not the one to speak to that. But since James Cameron's preferred version does include, you know, the element of the fact that Ripley lost her own daughter, I think in the version of this movie that we can sort of accept as quote unquote canon, even though I hate that word, you know, that's not being quote unquote forced onto someone who wasn't already a mother. She was a mother, and so so I do think that changes things up a bit.
I think it would be different if Vasquez wasn't expected to just jump in there and be motherly. That could be interesting.
She definitely would have let her play with the pulse rifle.
She totally would have let her play with the pulse rifle.
I will say, no, Kate, a discussion on How I Met Your Mother is not on the agenda. Not least because I haven't even gotten to, in all earnestness, to Gilmore Girls. So, like, I think you want me to focus on that before you send me off on a mission to watch How I Met Your Mother. So, which, I'm making progress. I only have like 5 billion things left to get through on my watch list. So, no, I'll tell you what I need to, and I know I've said this before, but it's true. I really do need to break that show into seasons and like mix in other stuff. Because if I'm waiting for the opportunity to sit down and watch all 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls, that's just probably not going to happen. So yeah, I got to work on that. But yeah, no. So the relationship between Ripley and Newt it really obviously is the heart of this movie, and it's just so beautiful. And yeah, it's funny. I do have alternative views on that. Moment at the end when she calls her mommy. On the one hand, I'm like, oh God, so emotional. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking of her actual mother in the afterlife going, what the hell?
I think her actual mother would be very, very happy with everything that Ripley did for her. But yes, it's just an instinctual moment from Newt.
I know. Oh God. So let's hit some of the action beats of this movie, because we've talked a lot about character, but like this is one of the all-time like most awesome action movies. We've really got when they finally go in and are looking for the aliens. One of my favorite lines, it's like a goddamn town meeting. and they go in there and they're completely overwhelmed, but then Ripley takes control, and it's actually one of Carter's better moments when he says, "You had your chance, Gorman," and when Ripley takes over. I'm like, that's actually a moment when I do cheer for him. I'll give you that, Laura. Even a broken clock is is right twice a day, although he only gets one. And just like that whole action sequences, pulse pounding, and there's the, I think we talked about that a little bit, and how we lose a bunch of the characters who were fun to watch, but we didn't necessarily know them that well. But I think one of the big highlights for this.
Mashed potatoes after those boxes fall on his head.
Yeah.
Although he gets a little bit smarter after that, so maybe they jarred something.
But the sequence I really want to talk about is when talking about Burke, and when he's not having good moments, when he's just being shitty, is when Newt and Ripley are sleeping, in the room, and then he deposits the face huggers into that room, locks the door, and then proceeds to turn off the monitor for the camera in that room. And that whole sequence is just like, you want to talk about intense. And and Newt says, "I'm scared, Ripley," and she goes, "Me too." And I'm like, "Me too." But it's just so awesome, and the way you just hear that stirring of the face hugger on the floor, and yeah, it's just
Yeah, I think that this is the scariest sequence in the entire movie because, when we think about the horrors of the alien, obviously the xenomorph is plenty scary, especially when there are many of them, and they're coming at you from every angle, and you're fearing being torn apart and taken away and cocooned. But the true, visceral, unsettling horror of the alien species is the face hugger and the idea of it affixing itself to your face and forcing its proboscis down your throat and implanting an embryo inside. And that was one of the things that made the original so iconic. And to see it here with a higher stakes where they're locked in a room with two of these things and they can't escape, and you're pounding on the glass and it's bulletproof glass and soundproof glass so no one can hear them. This is our in space, no one can hear you scream moment in this movie. And it's incredibly viscerally effective in that moment. And that makes it all the more, thrilling when they manage to overcome it. And that, and it exposes Burke for the treacherous weasel that he is. Which, but yeah, it's probably one of the most heart-pounding sequences in the film.
Which not to jump to after the scene, but yeah, when Hudson is like, "You're dead meat, pal." As much as Hudson starts out this movie, well, first unbearable because of how overconfident he is, and then he turns into a scaredy cat for a while, but then he comes in strong and it actually proves himself to be pretty dependable, once things get going. So, but yeah, no, the idea of just being stuck in a room with those things crawling around and they're just waiting to jump on your face and oh God, so creepy.
I mean, honestly, it's just like roaches in Florida. They fly at you. They have no fear of you. You flip on the lights, they're coming for your face.
Oh my God, that so reminds me of Dallas when we were all in the Airbnb and the cockroach scared Laura. Were you there for that?
I was there.
Yeah, I was there. I don't think I was in the room when that happened, but
we were all watching Return of the Jedi, and got to the moment when Luke is facing Vader, and John Williams' music is going with the chorus and everything, and she runs out of the room all of a sudden with her hand over her mouth, and I'm like, oh my God, is she really emotionally affected by this? And then we find out, no, there was a cockroach on the floor. And she was just running to get as far away from it as possible. I'm sure she doesn't find this nearly as funny as I do, but it was one of the highlights of the trip. Oh God, well that's a shame.
yeah.
I mean, that happened in Dallas. So yeah, I don't know. There's many reasons not to want to come back to Florida ever again.
Well, we have another horseback riding trip planned. So Lies, she's coming back.
And plus, I missed her when she came to visit last time.
You were in Maryland, yeah.
Yeah, because our trips overlapped. So no, she's got to come back so that I can fix that. But yeah, so yeah, a thoroughly creepy scene. but it's really delicious the way they corner Burke afterwards, and and Hicks is just ready to kill him. She's like, no, we got to take him back.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that is when the shit hits the fan, and the movie, like, as intense as it is up to that point, the action kicks in here and never lets up for the rest of the movie. When the aliens have found another way in, and we're not quite sure what that is because it looks like they're closing in, but they're not in the room, and then forgot to check the ceiling. And yeah, go ahead.
Kind of just blend into the scenery too, like, and you don't really catch them until they start actually rising up.
Oh yeah, like especially earlier in the movie when they first encounter them, and the way that they just like appear out of nowhere and come out of the walls. Yeah, I was watching something with somebody watching the movie on YouTube, and they just like jumped and got freaked out by the moment. And it's like, it's just, and what's really interesting, it occurred to me because that kind of scenery looked familiar to us from the first film, because we've seen the inside of the ship, but then it occurred to me that Ripley never went inside the ship. So like when she's seeing all this stuff through the camera, and she's like, I have no idea what that is. It's the first time she's ever seen anything like it too. And yeah, just the way that, there was they did a little bit of that trickery with the alien blending in the end of the first film when she's in the shuttle and his head looks like it's just one of the pipes or whatever. And then he sticks his hand out and everybody in the theater jumps. But this is a whole different thing where the whole environment looks like the aliens. And so when it just, I don't even know if it's the fact that they start moving that's creepy. It's that they were so still before they start moving. And and yeah, it's so creepy and terrifying.
Yeah.
And I love it.
And why don't you like horror?
Well, it's like you just gotta get me to watch it, but then once I'm watching it, I'm
okay. Yeah. I mean, this is like the most, I think, brilliant creature design ever.
Yeah, and we haven't. I don't even know if we mentioned the name yet, but we really do have to hand it to H.R. Giger, who obviously created the original design, and just like it's funny because I don't think I appreciated it until I was older, because growing up, like the design of the alien was just a thing in pop culture that they would just never wanted to see the movie because it freaked me the hell out. And I do remember it's not really a ride, but it's like a thing that I forget which park it is. It might be one of the Disney parks, or it might be Universal, or just one of those where it's more like a trip through like different movies and stuff. And I went on it a couple of years ago, and it was like, oh, that's not that scary. The alien kind of comes out of the wall. But I was on that. I did that when I was really little with my parents, and it scared the shit out of me. Which is probably one of the things that made me not want to watch the movie. But so I've always sort of known about the design of the alien, but like for people who saw this for the first time when it originally came on the scene, it must have been like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, because I mean, it has such a really unique blend of elements that are familiar, but some things we've never seen before. I mean, like, what creature can you name has a head shape like that? Like, that is nothing like we know on Earth. but it has human teeth.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, which, by the way, I want to say one of the things that I love the most about the design of the Queen is the way the teeth are kind of translucent. And it's just, I remember because my friend Tim had an alien toy when we were younger. He had it, and it was the Queen. And again, hadn't seen the movies at that point, but or at least, not without veil of, my hands over my eyes as a kid. But I just remember being fascinated by how it looked, at least as an action figure. An action figure, I'm not going to be terrified.
Right.
but it was just, it just looked so cool, and so when I finally got around to watching this movie and just seeing the way it rises up and the head comes out and then the mouth opens up and you see the teeth, I was like, oh my God, I'm scared shitless, but also what amazing effects and design work. And I mentioned H.R. Dieter, but also for the Queen and so many of the effects work in this movie. Like, hats off also to Stan Winston and his team, because oh my God, and I believe they came back for the new one. Obviously not Stan Winston, he's passed away, but his company came back to do effects work on the new Alien film, and like there's just no beating the work they did in this film. That, I mean, the costumes and just the design of the Alien Queen, and the way they made that all work, the animatronic, it's just like, it's unlike anything in movies. And like, I still put this film up against like any modern movie. You just cannot get better than those practical alien effects.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about like the fact that this movie is, how amazing it looks. Like, that was one of my indelible impressions just watching them, both of them, Alien and Aliens again, just this weekend, was thinking like, these movies look better than 99% of the movies that come out today. And some of that is, the amazing practical effects work. Other elements of it is just the way that they shoot them, the camera work that James Cameron kind of puts it through. Because, one of the brilliant things about the alien creature design is the fact that it is almost a mechanical organic hybrid in a certain way. It takes on certain elements of the environment around it, which is one of the reasons it allows it to blend in so effectively. But it also shows up in the movement, because obviously they're using puppets and cranes and things like that to move the characters or the aliens around. And one of the things that might, for a modern audience, they might be like, well, that it looks like it's moving like a very herky-jerky fashion. That's not believable. That's not the way a creature would move. But that's the way this creature moves. Because it is otherworldly, like it has a kind of, not to put a point, an alien way of motion that makes it feel like that much more unsettling. So, and I mentioned the idea of motion over design, the fact that they can show the creatures moving much faster now and then use quick cuts to emphasize the fact just how like inhumanly fast and dangerous these creatures are, is one of the triumphs. This movie rightly won Best Visual Effects, but it's a marriage of all of it. It's a marriage of production design and art direction and cinematography, and like all of it comes together to create a world that feels incredibly claustrophobic and lived in, and very much like there are things that can kill you literally coming out of the walls. Like, this movie captures that better than pretty much any movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to add the other element to the I mean, we did touch on it earlier, but it's not just that it can tear you apart. It's not that it's just an apex predator. It's the way it reproduces that is so psychologically unsettling. I mean, there's it's H.R. Geiger's work, so it has those vaguely uncomfortable sexual elements to it, that it invades your body. Like you lose control of your body. It has that very uncomfortable penetrative way of reproducing. It's you know it's like when we see in the first movie, it's like, oh, okay, well, the face hugger eventually falls off. Okay, he's better now. It's fine, and the fun has just begun, honestly. But it is like it's the whole package of this thing, and of why it works so well. And I think, as we see in later movies, especially in Prometheus, and we learn a little bit more about its biology and how it adapts to wherever it is, and like why it has. I think it's shocking too, because we don't know why it has human-like teeth at first, and it's so weird. It's so familiar. I don't know why that does something in here. You would think it would give it, like, if it wanted to give it a more uncomfortable, like, human-like quality, it would do the eyes or something like that. But no, we're gonna do teeth. And it just, I don't know what that is, but it does something.
Side note, just wanted to say hi to Cassie. She dropped in the chat, even though she hasn't seen it, but fix that, Cassie. Go watch it. No, I think I may have talked about that a bit in the stream I did about the original film, just how uncomfortable it makes everything, the manner in which the alien reproduces, and it's like so amazing that Ridley Scott did something so subversive in 1979. The fact that the alien basically impregnates a male member of the crew, and has Kane give birth to this monster, and it's so violent, and it's so it's just. I think the entire concept is a stroke of genius, but it's so disturbing. And and then we carry the horror of that into this movie, and that's why, like, the first thing that happens is Ripley has a nightmare about it happening to her, and and because that's in our minds, we're like, oh God. was she somehow infected by one of them? And it's and then when they come into the compound, and they come across someone who they think is a survivor, but then it comes out of their chest, which, by the way, is just like it shows how they had come along and like practical effects work in the years between the first movie and this one. Like, that is just gruesome when the creature is coming out of this woman's chest, and it's, oh God. And she's like, kill me, and it's like, yes. Kill her now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, they really do it, like, I mean, the idea of being violated in this, like, horrible and unfathomable way, like, they really do an effective job of making it clear that this is a fate worse than death. Not just die, but to die in this way as a host, like, for a parasitic thing that is now killing you, is... like, it plays on the most visceral levels of horror that kind of exist in our, primal wizard brains at the back of the skull. And we sympathize with the character's frustrations of the idea, like when Ripley has the conversation with Hicks, and she makes it very clear, I'm not ending up like that. You'll take care of it, won't you? And Hicks, in a good bonding moment for him, says, it comes to that, I'll do us both. And, like, you're like, yeah, like, that's probably what most of us would want in that situation, because we see that the people who are invaded by the alien and give birth to the chest bursters, like, they die in absolute horror and agony, and that is what makes this movie scary, because that is the fate we do not want our heroes to suffer.
And if it's a lesson that we've learned from oh God, who's the actor who played Kane in the first one?
John Hurt, man.
John Hurt. How could I not remember John Hurt's name? It was something that we learned from John Hurt. It's don't ever order the special.
Spaceballs. that is a joke. Like, I had not seen the Alien movie the first time I saw Spaceballs, so I was like, that went over my head, and now I watched it again. I'm like, oh. None of the aliens here sing. None of the aliens in this movie sing and dance, though. So we're spared that particular horror.
Yeah, little top hat to a little.
Oh God. Yeah, one of many things that just really has made Spaceballs so much more enjoyable as I've gotten older. Knowing all the references. Oh God.
Yeah, I know. Like a lot of other horror movies have tried to kind of recapture that body horror of being infected with something, and like it never. I don't know. There's just no topping the original. It just there's a lot that can be done to make it work, but it's never quite as shocking and as disturbing as Aliens. I mean, it's, obviously parodied, but also how much it's been copied and sometimes even blatantly ripped off these horror elements. I mean, I guess that's a form of flattery, I guess, but nobody ever actually does it quite as good as the original.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough thing about not only doing, science fiction horror in the wake of Alien, but also doing Alien sequels, is it's really hard to measure up to the original. And, this movie achieved it by upping the ante. But of course, one of the problems with upping the ante is you can only do it so far. And as some of the other movies have learned, there's a point where it stops being scary. And, and it's really tough to find the right mixture of it.
I'm thinking of, a lot of movies that kind of came out of this era that were pretty, pretty shocking and incredible for that era, as far as the idea of your body being taken over by something. And I would say The Thing, the original, John, it's an amazing movie. In that case it's a doppelganger,
Yeah, and that the concept of that scares the shit out of me too.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. But it also can transform you into something horrific. Yeah, you kill it with fire. But I would even also say things like the original Exorcist movie, which you probably have not seen either. But it is
no, that's one that's when my dad says that scared the shit out of me. Mm-hmm. That's when I'm like, okay, I don't need to see that.
I mean, I had seen it on TV when it was replayed on television and probably edited way down. But then it got re-released in theaters sometime later. I think I was probably about 18, 19 years old. It got re-released in theaters. And I went to go see the actual director's cut version of it in a dark theater. And even though I'd seen it before, it scared the shit out of me. But even that, it's you have no control. It's taken over a child. It is transformed their body physically. There's a lot of movies that came out of this era that were really really pushed the envelope in ways nobody ever saw before. And I don't think it's really been done again like that since.
Well, that reminds me, the whole thing of the possession of a child. That's why when we were watching The Witch, that whole sequence, with the young boy, just I was waiting for so much worse in that scene. he just dies in the end.
Yeah.
Like that's no big deal. But like I was just waiting for like an explosion of blood or something really absolutely horrifying, and so that kind of thing really sets me. But you know what? I made it through the witch, so. But yeah, it's like I said, the big thing really is getting me to sit down and watch these things. I'll probably be okay once I'm watching it, but it's just getting over that fear. But I don't know now. Like I'm not freaking surprised at all that Laura is begging me to watch the thing now. I'm like, big surprise. It's not something I'm rushing to do. No, Slasher Fred, we did talk a little bit about the differences, and I did talk about the fact that one of the big differences is that we stay in Ripley's POV longer in the beginning with the theatrical version, but I do think there's also I like a lot of the characterization that we get in the special edition as well. So for me, I think there's merit to both. I know, Jared, you said you saw the special edition first, and once you've seen that material in the movie, it is kind of, if that's how you see it the first time, it's kind of hard to go back after that.
Yeah, and I do think that that's part of it. I mean, ultimately, the reason I prefer the special edition is because I prefer the emotion of the connection between Ripley and Newt and having that backstory of Ripley's lost, daughter. But I do think the theatrical version is great. It's just that when you, as you said, when you see something first and then you watch the cut down version, you sometimes feel like maybe something has been taken away as opposed to something being added. And it is James Cameron's preferred version of the movie, the special edition is. It's kind of I love the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings and the theatrical versions of The Lord of the Rings. And because I fell in love with theatrical editions first, so I'm still happy to watch them, even though I love the extended editions. Had I seen the extended editions first and then had to go and watch the theatrical versions after that, I might have felt like something had been taken away from me. But I didn't have
especially those movies, because they're so substantially changed in the longer versions that I feel like anybody who's coming to the original versions after the fact is going to be like, what? Where's that scene? Where's that scene? Where's that moment? And it's I think it really a lot of times does come down to what you've seen first and what you're used to. So I know that finally the theatrical version of Amadeus is getting released either late this year or early next year, and that has not been available since the 1997 DVD, but it's the first version of the movie that I saw, back when it was on VHS, and that's the version of the movie that I love. So it doesn't matter how many times I've seen the director's cut, it always feels like something's off about that one, even though there's good stuff in there, but I will be geeking out hard when I get that 4K edition of the original Amadeus. So I might have to do a whole nother stream about it just to celebrate the occasion. That one, I'll have to see if I can get Shades of Thrones to come back on to discuss that again, because it seems like, I don't know if you were familiar with the superstition, Jared, maybe you were watching at that point, but the idea was that every time Shakes came on the stream in one of her costumes for whatever topic we were talking about, our views skyrocketed. so yeah, I'll have to see about that. But yeah, getting back to this movie, just so talking sort of about the climax of the film, once the action really kicks in and and they're trying to escape and Newt, falls down and into the water, which a lot of similar T2 moments. With the child getting stuck going down, some mechanical object and and having to be rescued.
This movie did it first.
Yeah, exactly. And just that great iconic moment of the alien coming out of the water behind Newt and and just again putting the child in jeopardy to make it, just plunge even tighter. But it's just it keeps upping the ante, and then the fact that I love that Hicks is kind of put out of commission because he gets sprayed with the acid and and so Ripley's having to carry him onto the ship, and then it's left to her. She's got to really go in and rescue Newt, and that's when we get badass Sigourney Weaver kicking butt. And but I will say, talking about Hicks, one of my favorite moments, which again kind of gets reprised by Ripley a little bit later, is when they get on the elevator and he hits the button multiple times. Which is such a relatable moment.
We have probably not praised Michael Biehn enough during this stream, because he is like another element of this movie that is like value added on top of like the dynamic from the original film, because he is the one who lives, at least for this movie, and he's the one who has the closest connection with Ripley. Obviously, it's heavily implied that there's an attraction there, and rightly so. They're two good-looking people in a tough situation. The situationship would have unfolded, had things gone differently. But it's also just clear from the moment, like, that he not only has empathy for her, but he like respects her, like from the start, and he's willing to listen to her, and so she kind of pays that back to him, like the great moment when after they've just gotten their asses kicked, man, as Hudson would say, and Carter Burke is trying to do some corporate legalese, and Ripley has the line like, well, I believe that this operation's under military jurisdiction and Corporal Hicks has the chain of command. Isn't that right, Corporal? And he's like, yeah, that's right.
Which let me pause for a second here and say that this is probably one of the only situations in which you want to go ahead and urge things to be deferred to the military when the other option is the corporate stooge.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. Hopefully, it's not a choice we have to make in real life, but it's but in this situation, when the choices are, like when you're back up against the wall, and the only option is to take off from orbit and nuke the site from orbit because it's the only way to be sure. I think you do want the military guy in charge. And obviously, like the bond between Hicks and Ripley, like, continues on in like that great scene where he's teaching her he's introducing her to his personal friend, the pulse rifle with the grenade launcher, and she's taking to it immediately, and he's like, and she's like, what's this? And he's like, oh, that's a grenade launcher. I'm like, you want to touch that? It's like, you started this, show me everything. And he kind of like smiles right there. And it's a very effective flirting, but then it ultimately culminates in another moment that I believe is in the special edition and not the theatrical, which is after Hicks gets burned, and like, and he, for one, he like is completely understands, like, no, we're not leaving without Newt. I understand this, Ripley. But then when she's going to go off and rescue him, and she takes the moment to pause and says, "See you, Hicks," and he says, "Dwayne, it's Dwayne," and she gives him her name, Ellen, and he just smiles and says, "Don't be gone long, Ellen." And and that's kind of his last moment of the movie, because he's unconscious for the rest of it. But it's kind of just a clear understanding of just how closely these two have gotten on the same page over the course of the movie, and it makes him a great action hero in his own right. That he recognizes that that this woman had the value to lead and to to take this child under her wing, and that she is fully capable of doing this, even without him. And he gives her his blessing, and she goes. And it's a great moment.
Yeah, it's like, and I understand why that moment was taken out of the theatrical version, because it's like at that point in the movie, it's like the pace is skyrocketing. It's like the clock is ticking, so like Ripley's just got to go. But it is just one of those instances of just give those little breather moments to flesh out character, and it then just makes everything richer. And that is definitely one of those moments for me. And so, yeah, I love that. And, and that takes Ripley down into the bowels of hell, so to speak. And I'm just a sucker for those, big climaxes in movies where you've got the big booming voice counting down to an explosion, and your main character has to go in and rescue somebody. And there's so many highs and lows, and she's like, she thinks that she's not going to find her because the tracker is off her wrist, but then Newt is about to get face hugged. And so she starts, which, by the way, great screaming from Carrie Henn. It's just then she goes to rescue her, and it's like she's in Mama Bear mode from there on out. And we talked a little bit about that moment when they come face to face with the alien queen. It's just this slow reveal. You see the eggs being laid, and just slowly pans over until finally you see the queen, but it hasn't fully come up yet. So you're like, what is that? And then bit by bit she's revealed, and it's just like, oh my god.
If you weren't disturbed enough before,
yeah. And I don't know, we can just
basically you get the impression that she is so large, she's immobile, and almost immobile, and it's like her sole purpose of existence is laying eggs, and it's very insect-like, and like a beehive or something. It's like queens really don't do much except they're tended to, and they lay eggs, and that's it. That's all they do.
Well, then that's great, because earlier Hudson has that moment where it's like an ant hive, man, and ants don't have hives. That's bees, man. Like, you know what I mean? It's there's one that controls them all, the queen, and it's like, she's big, man. And it's up this moment.
Yeah, and it's the brutality of even bees. If you think about it, it's like they can the hive can turn on a queen in some circumstances and kill her. Where you kind of, if you want to create a creature with a lack of humanity, not one drop of it, make it more insect-like. And I think that's just why this creature works so well. Sorry, I was going back to a question that Laura, I think, posted a while back. Oh God, yeah.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Oh God, so great.
Sorry, just because I wanted to kind of come back to it. Laura had a question. Do you think Ripley was justified in her hostility towards Bishop, or should she have been a little more reserved in her judgment, considering Ash was seemingly just a one-off? And I like that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
You should scroll up a bit.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. I think
she was, because like that was her experience, and in her, like her defense, that android went on a murdering spree.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I tend to think it's very effective because you understand it from both perspectives. Obviously, like ideally Ripley would, extend, recognize that Bishop is not Ash and extend that courtesy towards him from the start. But, her only experience with the android at this point had been with Ash, and now she knows that this new android is also working for the company, is also, somebody who could probably is going to put company orders over the personal safety, because that was Ash's whole thing. He was basically like, the crew is expendable if I just have to follow my directive. And so her suspicions are not unfounded, but obviously in this case, Bishop himself didn't deserve them, because Bishop was more than that. And that's a journey that, she needed to go on through this movie. Because Bishop proves it, Bishop. It's not that it's just that they find their way together and they have to work together to survive. Bishop continually demonstrates that he is worthy of being trusted, which is why that moment at the end of the action sequence, when she makes it up to the top and Bishop isn't there, and she thinks she's been betrayed again, and she's just screaming, "Bishop, God damn you!" And it goes into our mind, did he fuck her over? But no, he didn't. In fact, the opposite. He specifically put himself at risk to save her again. And from that point on, their relationship is solid.
Yeah.
And in fairness to Ripley, even though she isn't necessarily aware of this, but there's a long history of company androids doing some pretty fucked up shit.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of do see that in this latest Alien movie, Romulus, is where, androids don't exactly have the best reputation and are not very respected. So.
Yeah, I would not recommend Ripley ever come into contact with David, because then she will never trust another android ever again.
Well, okay, here, I think this whole movie is kind of playing with the idea of who has a monopoly on humanity, and obviously we've definitely seen a spectrum of humanity who are capable of heroics and capable of villainy and capable of, and some are just kind of in between, whereas, and that's juxtaposed with aliens that absolutely have no humanity whatsoever. But there in the middle are the androids. And you get, I mean, one can't really be angry at Ripley for maybe, okay, you might look at her a little sideways if she came out of this prejudiced against another human being, whereas, but the androids are not human, they're machines. So I mean, and one can understand that being part of her drama in coming out of and coming into the second movie, it's still very fresh for her what happened. I think one couldn't blame her for being a little jumpy around another android, because they're supposed to be in service to the humans on the ship, but they can have their own directives. But I do like how he refers to him as an artificial person. And we start to okay, well, there is a spectrum of humanity in androids too. And they are capable of self-sacrifice and altruism as well. And I guess it just depends on the way they are programmed. And is that really that different than biological humans? It's like it's our programming, the way we like either were raised or individual personalities and our experiences. So is it really that different? So
Yeah, and in fairness, I do want to say, like, we've gotten some good androids too.
and
Beyond
Andy's
just
top notch.
Bishop. Yeah, Andy's great. Unfortunately, he gets hijacked for a little bit, but
Yeah.
but in the end, he comes back to himself. And also, I really actually really love Walter from Covenant. It's great. Although the moment when when Walter is revealed to not be Walter in the very end, and that is one of the freakiest moments of this entire franchise. We've definitely gotten a number of good androids, and to balance out the bad, but the bad ones are so goddamn creepy that they linger in our minds.
Yeah, they're human, but I mean they look very human. They look no different than any other human. But they still have that. I don't know, like it's the subtlety in the acting where they kind of have that just a little bit off with the way they responded. Like you were saying, like the way that Ash looks around, he's analyzing. He's not really just hanging out. And there's still something a little bit off. And I think that's also played with too, as far as the creepiness of being human-like, but not really quite human. I mean, it's pushed to an extreme amount in the actual aliens themselves, like where they have some like human-looking attributes, but androids are they're meant to copy human mannerisms, but they don't even as good as they are. They still fall. They're still not quite there. And it is a little weird.
Yeah, and like the idea, this is obviously something that has been very central to science fiction, and the movie even like alludes to it with when Bishop is talking about models of the androids, and he's like that, like I could never harm or by means of inaction allow another harm to come to a human being. Obviously, that comes directly from Philip K. Dick's, 3 Laws of Robotics.
But also, that's coming from the android. It's like I'd be more comfortable hearing that from a more objective source.
Well, but it's also the idea that like kind of what Trish is getting into, like in many respects, one of the whole ideas of the Blade Runner franchise is like, are the androids in many ways more human than human? And we can see like the different sides of that, because like Ash in the first movie is incredibly cold and analytical, and that scene when he's talking about why he admires the alien, and like I admire its purity, its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility, the perfect organism. That's the very like cold, robotic, side of the androids, and basically the sociopathic side of people that like is present in danger. But then we also know that like for someone like Bishop, is he helping Ripley because it's like this is his programming, this is his directive? It seems more like he's making the choice to help her and to trust her throughout this movie, and that makes him more, feel more authentic and more, real when he comes back for her in the end and helps her. And then his kind of wry line at the end, after he's unfortunately been torn apart, but Ripley has defeated the alien queen, and he kind of looks at her and is like, not bad for a human. And and it's a bonding moment between the two to the two of them, because he understands why she did what she did, even though he is a machine.
I will say, my whole read on Ash was contaminated by the fact that I came to the movie and his performance in the film after he had already been Bilbo Baggins. So I entered the movie with an instinctive trust of Ash. So so even when he was being dismissive, I'm like, eh, come on, don't be so hard on him, Ripley. It's Bilbo. And then, of course, once things go south, I'm like, oh, shit. And by the way, I do want to say that this isn't a discussion about the first film, but like I have to say, I have always loved how Ash and the concept of androids in this universe was handled in the first film, where obviously, even though they don't know Ash is an android, the characters are familiar with the concept of androids, but we as the audience are not, at least in this universe. And so when he starts acting weird and crazy, and we see white colored, sweat coming down his forehead, and like we're like, what the hell is going on? And then when his head gets knocked off, we're like, holy shit, because we weren't even prepared for robots or androids to even enter into the story. So I think that's part of what makes that reveal so shocking in the first film. Mm-hmm. And the nature of the androids in this series. I've always been really freaked out by their design and like their insides and all that, because it's so different from what we've gotten in other things.
Also like biological, mechanical. Like, yeah. Yes. Also with like this white kind of balloon-looking things and like the milky substance.
Yeah, it's so kind of honestly gross.
It is kind of gross, yeah.
And it's messy, and so it just adds a different slant to the androids of this world, and for that reason, I've always loved their design, and because it feels so alien, honestly. And yeah. And so it adds to that creepiness is sort of implied when we see Bishop bleeding, from his finger, and it's the milky white substance. And so we're kind of like, no, we're on board with Ripley. Like, why weren't we told about this? But it's so rewarding then in the end of the movie when it turns out that he actually was trustworthy. And it is unfortunately down to the programming, and Ash's model. That generation was particularly screwy, and apparently that continued with Rook. And although Rook is pretty on the level about like what he's about, so yeah, you can't. I hold more against Ash for being a duplicitous, son of a bitch. But yeah, no, that was traumatizing for the Bilbo fan in me. Let me see. Just doing some reading on the chat. See what you guys are talking about. I think did you get confused about who came up with the laws of robotics?
Yeah, I realized it as soon as I said it. I'm like, it's Asimov's law of robotics, but I got it confused with Philip K. Dick, who wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that it's the inspiration for Blade Runner. So just but it was a faux pas in the moment, but thank you, Eric, for.
We forgive you. No, which is funny. I actually read that book while I was at a Star Wars convention, and I read it within like 24 hours. It's seriously an amazing book, and made me appreciate the film even more. And Kate's having some trouble with those nails. I did know about this. I didn't quite remember which one it was, but I remember that William Hope did read an audiobook. Which are those are novelizations that I actually haven't gotten to. And I do want to fix that one of these days, because I always love reading novelizations. They just give you a bit more. And before the special edition of this movie came out, I imagine it was pretty cool to read that novelization and get all the little added bits, because a lot of times those do function as director's cuts. Thinking about some of the Star Wars novelizations too. They've really used that format to give fans some extra content. Thinking of The Last Jedi in particular, which has some cool stuff. I mean, we should ask the aliens if they have a tough time typing.
Well,
Which is not a comparison I meant to make.
With their mouth.
Oh god, yeah. And I'm thinking of the guy with forks for hands. I just watched Deadpool and Wolverine. Okay, so what didn't we talk about? Well, I mean, I don't know. We kind of went here and there with the big action beats, but I do want to talk about when it's the face off between Ripley and the Queen. There's just that great moment where she shoots off that flamethrower as a warning, and she kind of starts to back off, but then one of those eggs opens up, and Sigourney just does this really great tilt of the head, like, and then she just blasts all of them. and that makes the alien queen one mad mama.
Yeah. No, I mean, like Trisha alluded to earlier about how the alien queen was originally like so huge that it looks like she can't move, at all, because she's tied to this. Yes, we talked about this during when we did our Revenge of the Sith stream, and how the Revenge of the Sith novelization is like just a beautiful piece of writing in itself. But yeah, like, when Ripley, when the truce is broken and the Queen has to move, she can move. She tears herself free of the she can tear when she tears herself free of that ovipositor. Like, like just how furious she is about with Ripley and what she's done. And it's a heart pounding sequence, yeah, because like another you John had mentioned earlier that you love when there's like a countdown and the voiceover like telling us how much time. One of the things I love so much about both the ending of Alien and this movie is that the final sequences do unfold in something pretty close to real time. Like I timed it when the computer says you now have 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. Guess what? When Ripley emerges onto the platform, it's been 15 minutes since that happened, which is obviously just great like editing, but it doesn't feel like we're skipping beats and
which I was thinking about this when I was watching. I was like, that's like Ripley is really efficient at her time management, because when I think about what is it, 20 something minutes in my world, it's like, I don't want to get up off the couch. And then if I do, it's going to take another 25, 30 minutes to do this or that. And I'm like, damn, she gets some stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, weirdly, I almost feel like she's not moving fast enough in certain sequences where she's like slowly looking around corners, and I'm like, you do realize this place is about to blow up, but it obviously adds to the tension and everything, and it makes it more, relatable for the audience, especially in that moment when she finds the watch that she's been tracking, and she thinks, Newt is gone, and then she hears Newt scream, and she just springs into action immediately, and the sequence where they're trying to escape back out of the after Ripley has torched the eggs, and she's trying to get the elevator to come. Like the very relatable moment of the elevator is not coming fast enough.
Come on, goddammit!
Goddammit, yeah. But again, this is like one of what I was talking about. Like everything that's going wrong can go wrong, because then the elevator's not coming fast enough. Then it finally does come, and she gets in. But in doing so, she's accidentally summoned the second elevator that the alien queen is going to use, and then she gets up to the platform.
Which, talk about great head tilts. The alien queen kind of does a little.
Yeah.
And decides to get on the elevator. Which the magic of movies. Could the alien queen have fit on the elevator? Not sure, but hey, it works. To say nothing of getting on the ship.
She seems pretty like a pretty flexible lady. I think she managed to bend a leg.
But yeah, no, it's just, oh god, it's so, and like this whole like thing is just so intense that like you are kind of fooled into thinking that this is the big climax, and that when everything blows up, that you forget the ending of the first movie for a second, and and then you're having heartwarming moments with Hicks is okay. We're going to talk with Bishop. He did a good job, Bishop. I did. Yeah, you did. And then all of a sudden, what the hell? And all of a sudden things are dire again, and then we get the power loader coming out, and like just one of the like most iconic like movie monster fights, maybe the most iconic, just like between Ripley and the alien queen, and get away from her, you bitch. Just so great. And yeah, it's that the fight is so intense, and like, and yeah, the queen is kind of moving a bit like that, as you would expect an animatronic to move, but somehow it just makes it so much more real, that even if it's, they could be more fluid with if it was a CGI thing, but then it wouldn't feel real the way that this does. And so it's just, for me, every time I watch this, I'm like, oh my god, just what an achievement. And of course this movie won Best Visual Effects, because these are some of the most stunning and amazing special effects in the history of film. And yeah, I just like, I hold my breath the entire time. And by the way, like I also want to comment, I praised James Horner earlier, but I also want to talk about that as often as the music is great in this movie, like it's also notable that there's a lot of moments when the music cuts out and there's no music, and it's just like either silence or the sound effects of, like in this case, the alien and the power loader, and and Ripley's screams as she is going, and all that stuff. And it's just really intense, and the music doesn't really kick in until like they fall down and the airlock opens up, and and then the score comes in. It's just, I think it's just so great at holding you in that tension of these moments where you don't necessarily have the music to sort of, I don't know if comfort is the right word, but to carry you through these moments. You're just kind of holding your breath as you're watching these two titans go at each other.
No, and Laura points out that like the movie does an excellent job of setting this up in the earlier part of the movie, when with Ripley being qualified to drive the loader, and that being like the only job she could get when her flight license was temporarily suspended, and it ends up paying off in spectacular fashion by the end. And that sequence earlier in the movie where she's impressing Hicks and Apone with her ability, and she just kind of like picks it up and is like, "Where do you want it?" And they both like laugh and smile. Like
Which, by the way, and that's another great, A-Pone moment where she's like, "Can I do anything?" He's like, "I don't know. Can you?" And the way that man chews his cigars, it's just so amazing. Again, a character that we lose fairly early, but oh my God, he stole every scene he was in.
Yeah, Laura had asked earlier who was our favorite Marine, our favorite colonial space Marine, and it's hard not to say Hicks, and Hudson and Vasquez are all great too, but I will put my money in for A-Pone because the actor Al Matthews, he just, as you said, he puts the sauce on every line reading and just milks it for all it's worth. Like one of my favorite line reads has always been when he's like, "All right, first assembly's in 15 people, shag it." And you're just like, he didn't need to say it that way, but it just makes him feel like such a, like a classic, old gunnery sergeant, where even if these kind of ragtag Marines don't respect Gorman, they sure as hell respect A-Pone because he's been in the trenches with him. He knows all of them and he knows all their shit. Like, look into my eye. And when Hudson gets out of line and he's like, "Hudson, come here. And you're like, "Uh-oh, Daddy's pissed."
Yeah, am I right in guessing, Trish, that your vote goes for Vasquez? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to throw a bone to Hicks or Hudson, but I think I got to go with you, Jared. Like, I love A-Pone. He's just so great. And I could have seen a version of this movie where he's in, where he plays a bigger role and is around for longer. But it just is the way it is. Like, he doesn't waste a second that he's in this movie. So
I do have to say Vasquez has like one of the best lines though.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah.
Which one? She has so many.
Like, Vasquez, have you ever been confused for a man? And she's like, I don't have you. Like,
so good.
So good.
Yeah, let's talk about her for a second because we mentioned her, but I don't feel like we really talked because she has so many great moments because throughout like the latter part of the movie, like it feels like there's the team up is her and Hudson, and she's the one kind of keeping him in line. Like, she's the one of that pairing with nerves of steel. And yeah, it just feels like she's she's just the badass. She's ready.
You get the impression, like, she's a private. But you get the impression that she has had to do more, be more, work harder, show up, and like, yeah, especially when she's like doing pull-ups and like really like showing off, and flexing and having to like honestly present like almost exaggerated masculine, to be able to like, I guess, hold her own in this company because come on, it's the military, it's very hyper masculine, so it's kind of like it would be hard in that situation to be like to switch back and to be like remotely feminine and be able to, and not get called on it so I mean, although it's like left ambiguous as to how much of this is just is this like natural to Vasquez of like this is how they view themselves and this is how they want to present, or is it more like where they have to be, they're adapting their environment? But like, I mean, I think Vasquez just like is a Marine, like it takes to being a Marine like a fish in water, and this is like, but I feel like they have always had to be that and be like more, like do more, achieve more, be tougher, be like a little bit more bombastic, and So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's an important thing because, like, well, there are, Vasquez is our primary female Marine. There are two others, Dietrich and Farrow, who are also kind of with very, like, masculine presenting hairstyles and the like. But, like, yeah, but Vasquez definitely seems like the one who is the most, like, both at home in her role, but also has had to, like, earn and scrap for every bit of the respect that she has from people like Drake and Hicks and things, and obviously her dynamic with Hudson is a little bit fraught.
Yeah.
But, like, we believe, like, that she is the most capable of the most capable, and that even leads to a little bit of, like, tension with her and Ripley early in the movie, because we think of Ripley as this, like, hard-edged badass because we see her throughout the movie, but at the beginning, she's a civilian, and Vasquez is looking at her with almost, like, contempt, like, hey, who's Snow White? Like, who's this pretty lady who's, thinks that she can hang with us? But then obviously she comes to respect, Ripley very immediately, very intimately by the end, and her final stand is incredibly moving because she's kicking ass, she's given as good as she got, and then the alien traps her, and, like, that kind of sad moment where, she blows the face off the alien with the gun, but in doing so causes acid to splash on her leg, and you just hear go like, oh no, because, like, she was gonna make it out, and then this, like, bad luck happens to her, and now she's gonna buy it on this rock, like Hudson says, but she doesn't go down, she doesn't take it lying down. Like, she gets one of the best final lines when Gorman, to his great credit, comes back for her, and then they realize they're surrounded, and she just looks and like, you always were an asshole, Gorman. But then they use their hands, they join their hands, and they blow the aliens to hell. So yeah, it's a great character, and I do feel glad to know that Jeanette Goldstein, who portrayed her, actually, she did get awards recognition, not like Oscar recognition, but I think she was nominated for a Saturn Award for this performance. And she's become, kind of an icon in her own right, at a time when there were not a lot of characters who looked like her, both as a woman and as a, it's also put in there that, she's Latina in the movie. And, they her crap for that too, the whole, like, illegal alien joke that probably would not pass muster today, but, like, that's something else she's had to fight against as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I do love that final moment with Gorman. It's actually a good moment for Gorman where he,
redeems himself a little bit.
Yeah. And I like the fact that there's almost a little bit of a, is he going to be able to, like, really, make the explosive go off? And but then it's both of them together, and it's just, yeah, it's a really great moment, and and she's a great character, and yeah, like I said, they just did a really good job with the whole cast in this movie. I think everybody gets their little moments. And yeah, they just did a great job. Yeah, so and the movie ends obviously with Ripley disposes of the alien once more, and as we talked about earlier, the movie ends on a really good emotional note with Newt, and they've been tugging at our heartstrings the whole movie with the fact that here you have a woman who lost her daughter and a young girl who lost her family, and so there's this wonderful found family element to the movie, not just with the two of them, but also with Hicks and to a certain degree Bishop as well, and I'm not. Again, this is why I have such issues with Alien 3, because
I was about to say, and then there's Alien 3.
It just fits all over that, and and so that's why I just like.
Again, we got to re-traumatize Ripley.
Yeah, there are things that I do admire about Alien 3. Chief among them, brilliant score by Elliot Goldenthal, which is who I feel is a really underrated composer. You can say what you will about Batman Forever, although I will always be actually one of that movie's defenders. But the score by Elliot Goldenthal is just stunning and amazing. And the same is true for his work on Alien 3. And then the other thing that I really like about Alien 3, even though he doesn't make it very long, but the great Charles Dance is in that film. And I think he's probably, outside of Sigourney Weaver, he's the best part of that film. And so
I was about to say,
like, he's so young. He's so young in it.
I was about to say, like, her and Hicks don't get to ride off into the sunset. It's like, nope.
Yeah.
Like, nope. Charles Dance, though.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a good-looking man.
Mm-hmm.
And Charles Dance in Alien 3.
Yeah.
Like, I get it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just the entire starting premise of the movie is just, I find it so difficult to get past. I almost have to, like, I've only seen it a couple times, but whenever I do watch it, I just kind of have to separate it out from, from what the first two Alien movies are, and especially Aliens, because it's just so disrespectful towards that film, in my opinion. And so I just, for that reason, I do give David Fincher, who's a great filmmaker, like, credit for having really high ambitions for that film, which is not something I necessarily say about the film that followed it. But that's a different discussion.
Which would be Alien Resurrection.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
oh gosh, that's a whole other conversation.
But yeah, so I'm not without positive things to say about it, but it is not, for my money, the sequel to Aliens that I would have liked to see. And so, yeah.
I mean, you can just, like, I think I'm in agreement with you, John. Like, I actually think that there are elements of Alien 3 that I enjoy immensely. I think it's, David Fincher did what he could for terrible studio interference for that movie, and actually the assembly cut is, much better than the theatrical cut. Charles Dance is great. Sigourney Weaver is incredible in that movie as well. But yeah, the starting premise of we'll just say it, the deaths of the off-screen deaths of Hicks and Newt. It's the rare thing where, like, nothing can damage Aliens for me. I think it's a perfect movie, but it is one of the rare things where I feel like that decision almost undercuts the power of this movie's ending. And it's one of the reasons why, even though I normally hate it when studios do this, when there was a rumor a few years ago that Neil Blomkamp of District 9 fame was considering making an Alien sequel that would proceed from Aliens and it retcon Alien 3, I was like, I hate, maybe I could work with this. I ultimately, that didn't come to fruition.
I was really excited about that. Yeah. And I felt so gutted when it never came to fruition. But I'm kind of fine with just having my own headcanon of where the story goes after Aliens. I know that this is kind of I know we've had this discussion, Jared, where you especially don't like it when fans say, well, I don't consider this movie canon or whatever. I'm in agreement with you 99.9% of the time, but when it comes to Alien 3, I'm I'm pretty dead set on pretending like it never happened.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to this. The next time I have to say that there's some Star Wars movies and that I will just pretend don't exist, and I'm going to stop right here where I'm happy.
Oh, Jared really doesn't like that.
We've had this discussion, Trish, and I respect your point of view. I think we had a good conversation about it in Dallas. I'll just say that, Star Wars is one of the reasons that I have the feelings that I do, because it's not just even the sequel movies that I love, chief among them, Rise of Skywalker. It's the fact that people did this to the prequels too, and many other movies that I love. And so I find it kind of a disrespectful approach to.
You know what? I will say, I'm one of those people that really, really liked The Last Jedi. I really liked it, and I'll defend that movie. And you know what? I just want to. I'm good there. I'm good.
Let's not go off the rails, because this can go. This can go in a wild direction.
That's fine. I've got enough love for The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker to fill 3 people's hearts. So I'm just good.
There you go. So I'm okay with you saying, you know what, stopping with Aliens and just saying, you know what, I'm good here. I don't need anything else. I'm good. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah. We've had this conversation about pirates too.
I do actually have a hardback edition of some comics that they wrote to follow up Aliens that were put out before Alien 3 was made. So, and in that, Hicks and Newt play a vital part of that story. Mm-hmm. And they don't die, at least. I've never gotten to the end of the series, because I think it continues on past what I've got, but at least they don't die right off the bat. I know that much. So yeah, I'm very happy to have that. But yeah, anything that there's probably some more stuff we could cover. I'm just I've tried to keep this from turning into a 4-hour stream for Trisha's sake. We've already almost gone 3 hours, and I feel like there's a bunch of stuff that we could have talked about that we didn't. But is there anything that either of you especially wanted to mention, that we didn't?
No,
we didn't get around to.
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything. You can go on a whole lot of tangents just to how things bled into subsequent movies. But I'm just saying, if you're ever up for Predator discussions or Alien versus Predator movies, I'm okay with that too.
Oh yeah, we can definitely do Predator one of these days. Arnold and Carl Weathers, I'm absolutely down for that. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen it, but
talk about a bunch of Marines with personalities. So,
yeah. If you were interested in movies in the Predator franchise, I cannot put a more strong recommendation behind the most recent entry in the franchise, Prey.
It was
that
great.
That movie rocks. And the lead character, Amber Midthunder, very much in the vein of a Ellen Ripley type heroine.
Oh yeah.
I actually have that on 4K, because I bought the physical media version when they released it. Haven't even gotten around to watching it yet, but I bought that as a message to Disney to release their shit on physical media. So because that was a streaming only movie originally. But it's in my library, so I'm gonna get to it.
That was such a shame it never got a theatrical release. That it was only streaming on Hulu, I think.
Which, by the way, speaking of Amber Midthunder, if any of you guys have seen that and you were a fan of her work in that, she is also in the FX series Legion, which I am a huge fan of. A great X-Men series that is very unique and mind-bending and freaky, and a far cry from anything MCU. So I loved it. But if you have never seen it, check it out, because it's just incredible. That unfortunately only one season made it to Blu-ray, so the rest the rest of it you have to get Hulu for. But yeah, I highly recommend that. And I've tried to get somebody to come on and talk about that one for a while. Have you ever watched it, Jared?
Legion.
Yeah.
No, I started watching the first season, and then it was just a busy time, and I fell off. I remember really liking the pilot, but I never finished the season, unfortunately.
Yeah, I really wanted to get Ashaya to come on and talk about it because she loves that show. But around the time that I was asking her, she was stepping away from like doing like appearances on channels outside of, obviously she does all the stuff for, over on the history of Westeros. But because I had her on to talk about the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and we had a blast doing that. The first of many streams I've done on that show. So I don't know. Maybe I'll try and bug her again at some point. But yeah, no, that's just to have it on your radar, Jared. That's something that I would like to cover at some point on the channel, because it's just one of the best things that Marvel has ever done, in my opinion. Or, well, technically Fox. But yeah, it's great. So, but yeah, on the subject of Predator, I'm up for that, and that requires much less of an investment to revisit that than getting setting aside time for 3 seasons of a series. So yeah, I guess I'll just say that I had a blast rewatching this movie today. It is like I talked a little bit about how these things tend to traumatize me less as time goes on, because I've seen these movies so many times. So like the first time I watched the first Alien and it got close to the chestburster scene, I kept pausing the movie, getting up and pacing around. And then pressing play for another 10 seconds, pausing it again, getting up and pacing around. That doesn't happen anymore. I can make it through these movies pretty easily. But the tension, is something that gets my heart racing, especially with this one, because yes, it's a horror movie, but it is also just an amazing thrill ride. And so even if after watching it for the 100th time, I'm not quite as scared as I used to be, I am still like, just my heart is still pounding, watching the film. So yeah, I had a great time, and just thank you to both of you, and thank you, Trish, for coming on to talk about this, because it was so much fun, not just to talk about this movie, but just to have you back on the channel, because it's been a while.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Yes.
Just to refresh everybody, next week we'll be talking about the first season of the Netflix series Arcane. So please watch it if you haven't yet, and come join us for that conversation. On the horizon after that, the week after that we'll be off, and then after that, in no particular order, we'll be talking about the Penguin, and then celebrating the 10th anniversary of Interstellar. So we got a lot of fun stuff. That's a whole season of a TV show. I'm sure that'll take us a long while, and then our Christopher Nolan streams do tend to go as long as possible. So yeah. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say before we wrap up. I don't think so. I will just say, because I always have to, talk about physical media. I did a little bit, but specifically about Aliens. If you are looking for the comprehensive home video edition to get, even though the 4K version of the first Alien film is great, I still think that the best overall package, if you can get it, I'm not sure, it's been a number of years, is the anthology box set. It has all 4 films and so many bonus features and wonderful documentaries. And all the films look great. So do not, I repeat, do not buy the new 4K edition of Aliens because James Cameron hates his movies apparently because it looks terrible. They've been mutilated with digital noise reduction and AI. So please do not get that version. Go for good old Blu-ray. But yeah, okay. I had my little nerdy moment there with with that. We'll go and wrap things up now. Hope to see you guys next week, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining. It was really great to see so many friends here tonight. I love you all, and yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye.